He's definitely been having a resurgence and a renaissance. Deservedly so. I mean, we're coming on it close to a century after his debut.
Yep.
Of course, with the sword and sorcery genre having its own rise in popularity again.
Yep.
We can't not bring our patron saint. But no, watching all of these authors gush over him, reporters and bloggers making their journeys through his back catalog, there is no wrong way to Robert E. Howard, which I love. And just this past weekend, I was actually at GalaxyCon Richmond on a panel with Larry Hama and Christopher Priest.
Oh, wow.
Who, comic book legends who gush over sword and sorcery as much as every other fanboy. I mean, they worked for Marvel back in the heyday on that comic, and let me tell you, there's nothing more wild than hearing Larry Hama, whose own life reads like an action-adventure novel, God G.I. Joe, talking about Robert E. Howard with the same level of love and passion generations of authors and fans alike have. All roads lead through Robert E. Howard.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It was like one of the greatest stories, like in the comics I was talking about from like late 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s. And I discovered a few years later, and like they were nearing the end of the print, but like in one of them, I still remember, I have it somewhere and stocked away, but like at the end they would have little stories about Robert E. Howard. They would have, it was just really cool, and somebody would actually draw them out, and they had like little panels. So it'd be like just like, you know, a couple panels or something. But there was one that was so interesting, and it was actually one of Robert E. Howard's like really good friends talked about why Conan was written out of order, so to speak. And he said that, you know, sometimes he would go to his like little farmstead, and on the front porch he'd be out there writing, and he would be like, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm just finishing like this chapter or something. And he'd be writing, and then he's like kind of listening over his shoulder, and then he'd go and start like writing again. And it was so interesting because his friend said it was almost as if you could see Conan sitting there telling his friend a story. And it was so interesting because he said that it was out of order because, and then he asked him one time, he's like, hey, why do you write these out of order? Like, why don't you do like book 1, 2, 3, and you know, how they coincide? And he said, Robert said that it's almost like Conan talks to me like a friend. Hey, did I ever tell you about that time? And then I write that story. And then a different part, you know, so it'd be like a different part of his life or something, and like would randomly come up in conversation. And I thought that, like, as an early writer, I thought that that was absolutely brilliant, and the imagination that it played for me was super cool. So if anybody ever wants to check that out, make sure you check out those comics, because man, and the comics were great, right? Because they went for the books, but it was really learning about his life and kind of like who he was, I think was also super, super cool. So yeah, I totally agree. It's awesome that he's getting a resurgence, and same with Sword and Sorcery. But with people like you, Sean, right? It definitely helps.
And if I can briefly plug, for those who want to see the Robert E. Howard house, which is awesome, by the way. That's like, cool. You get to see Robert E. Howard's room where he typed every single word of fiction he did. Howard Days every June in his hometown of Cross Plains is wonderful. And this is the 40th anniversary of the event this year, and they're raising funds to restore and refinish the Howard House for the next 100 years of Howard heads to come and pay pilgrimage.
Oh, that's super cool.
No, it's a wonderful time in Howard fandom and Sword and Sorcery, and I'm happy to see we're doing our part to preserve it for the next generation.
Yeah.